The Russian Federation shall immediately suspend the military operations that it commenced on 24 February 2022 in the territory of Ukraine. The Russian Federation shall ensure that any military or irregular armed units which may be directed or supported by it, as well as any organizations and persons which may be subject to its control or direction, take no steps in furtherance of the military operations referred to in point 1 above. Both parties shall refrain from any action which may aggravate or extend the dispute before the court or make it more difficult to resolve.
Ukraine filed its case at the International Court of Justice shortly after Russia's invasion began on February 24th. It argued that Russia's apparent justification that it was acting to prevent a genocide in eastern Ukraine is unfounded. In addition to disputing the grounds for the invasion, Kyiv also sought emergency provisional measures against Russia to halt the violence before the case is heard in full. Although the court's rulings are binding, it has no direct means of enforcing them, and in rare cases, countries have ignored them in the past.
It deems it necessary to emphasize that all states must act in conformity with their obligations under the United Nations Charter and other rules of international law, including international humanitarian law.
During hearings earlier this month, Ukraine said there is no threat of genocide in eastern Ukraine, and the UN's 1948 Genocide Convention, which both countries have signed, does not allow an invasion to prevent one. Russia says it has skipped the hearings at the ICJ, also known as the World Court, in light of the apparently absurdity of the lawsuit. It later filed a written document arguing the court should not impose any measures. Russian President Vladimir Putin has described the invasion as a special military action needed to protect people who have been subjected to bullying and genocide, referring to those whose first or only language is Russian in eastern Ukraine.
All right, we talk about this matter further with advocate and law lecturer in public international law, Evans Ogada. He speaks to us about this court ruling. He speaks to us from Nairobi in Kenya. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Advocate Ogada. So let's just first start with your reaction and the demand made through the verdict. It was a case of 13-2 votes that voted on this urgent request by Ukraine about Russia to halt its invasion. Are you aware of who the two that voted against it might be and why that may be?
Well, good evening from a very warm Nairobi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You can go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. And first and foremost, congratulations to the Amazulu for the recognition of King Misizulu by the president today. That's a good feat for not only the Zulu and South Africa, but for Africa as a whole. Now, with regards to the decision by the court today, this is what we call a temporary decision. In international law, we call this an indications. Indication meaning it's a temporary decision by the court. The merits, the entire case is yet to be determined. The two dissenting judges, I don't know the second judge, but my gut instincts tell me that if the Russian judge to the court, the vice president of the court, Kirill Gavogian, was sitting on that bench, then he certainly dissented. And you will understand that for the reason that Russia is facing a very nationalist wave in the country, such that if this judge will give a decision this early against his home country, then that will be indicative of would rather bring him some sort of problems at home. As far as my reaction is concerned, well, temporary orders such as these ones are usually meant to safeguard certain rights before the decision is made.
Okay.
So basically what the court is saying is that we are going to preserve certain rights claimed by Ukraine before the decision on the merits is determined. And what are these rights being claimed by Ukraine?
All right, so before we get into the merits of the case, I want to talk about the jurisdiction of the court, because this was a big issue. You know, Moscow itself refused to appear before the ICJ, saying that it doesn't see it as having jurisdiction over it. And the Ukrainian president seems to see it as something that is final in the way that he calls it a complete victory. So is it a complete victory or more symbolic victory?
Well, I will term it a symbolic victory. The question of jurisdiction might change. What the court has done is to recognize that it has a prima facie jurisdiction. What is meant by a prima facie jurisdiction? This is jurisdiction based on first impression, that on the basis of what the Republic of Ukraine has put before us, the case before us, the evidence before us, we are going to accept that we correctly have jurisdiction over this matter in accordance with Article 9 of the Genocide Convention until we establish otherwise, which means that if the court hears the entire case and decides it on the merits, it may as well reverse itself on the question of jurisdiction. It might as well decide that we don't have jurisdiction on this matter.
All right. So we had Russia on one hand saying that it's acting in self-defense, but as you say, Ukraine saying it approached the court on the basis of the Genocide Convention, of which both sides, it says, have signed. But is it enforceable if, when the merits of the case are then considered and there's agreement, does it have the executive powers to enforce the decision, the ICJ that is?
Well, let me be clear on what is before court. What is before court is an application by Ukraine that was filed in court on the 26th of February, 2022 at around 9:30 p.m. Hague time. What the Ukraine is saying is that Russia is falsely accusing us of killing Russian nationals, Russian-speaking nationals who are otherwise Ukrainian citizens. And this Putin and his foreign minister Lavrov claimed that Ukraine was actually conducting genocide. Now, Ukraine filed this application, and this was a stroke of genius by Ukraine. Ukraine goes to court because they don't have, Russia and Ukraine both have not accepted compulsory jurisdiction of the court under Article 36, but both are members of, both are treaty members of the Genocide Convention. So Ukraine has filed this suit on the basis of the Genocide Convention and basically telling the court to find that Russia is making false accusations on the basis of the Geneva Convention, that Russia is illegally using military power contrary to the Geneva Convention provisions and contrary to the UN Charter. That is some of the allegations that are before court right now.
I do apologize
in terms of,
for having to cut you off so abruptly, because there's so much to talk about, a lot of substance to get out of this. But unfortunately, we do have to go to something else. But I do appreciate your time and your insight. Advocate Evans Ogada, and a reminder that the Ukraine has approached separately the International Criminal Court.